don't think
ready?
so, but
I will literally never be ready.
welcome to episode 76. I'm Katie,
I'm Garrett.
and this is the Bars Ankle High, your weekly ADHD podcast that explores life's slow bars with wit and wisdom.
And witticisms.
Something.
Um, so do we have any housekeeping items? I don't think
A
so.
little bit. The big thing, big reminder, I guess, is that we have updated our Patreon. So there's only one tier now. So it's just the $5 a month anklet tier, but everybody gets ad-free episodes. You also get extended cut episodes, which included like a longer intro to this episode. You also get video episodes to each episode. So if you prefer to like see our faces and like follow along kind of more IRL, then you would have that access on by joining our Patreon. And everybody on Patreon gets added if you want to. You can get added to our close friends list on Instagram. So you see more behind the scenes stuff, more like extra spicy memes that I might share to our Instagram stories, things like that. So you can join our Patreon at patreon.com/thebarsankle-high. And there's also now a feature where you can do like a 7-day free trial. So you can join, still get access to
Oh, that's
everything.
cool.
And then at the end of the 7 days, you can, like, your membership will actually start. So yeah, that's an option as well
And I
now.
mean, why wouldn't you want it to start? Because it's so fun.
um, and also welcome to our newest Patreon member, Jamie, the neurodivergent nurse.
Oh my
Um,
god.
Speaking of new Patreon members,
Truly one of our
and you get
favorite
an
people.
on-air shout out. I know, she's such a doll.
She
And
really is. She's definitely too nice to be
so
friends with us.
I know, and like way too talented. She's really out of our league.
Yes, she is.
Like that
We're
video
swinging
of
up
like,
with that friendship.
yes. Yeah. We're hitting way out of our weight class.
Oh yeah.
There's no reason for her to be nice to us.
No, we are not that nice to other people.
Um,
Oh,
but
God.
yeah, I think that's the only real like update um as far as like housekeeping stuff is concerned. So, what are we talking about today, Garrett?
Today we are gonna and this topic came up. I was like chatting with my therapist and it came up when I went to my therapy appointment, which I know we had like mentioned in a recent episode where we were saying how like Katie reminded me and I was like, oh yeah, that's right. I emailed my therapist and then never responded to her when she offered me dates and times. And
Yes.
then just to be clear, I did go to the appointment and I was like 20 minutes late. Again, fully prepped everything for myself and I don't even know what happened, but I left 20 minutes late and I had the baby with me and it was pure chaos. So
That's true
one of the
because you sent
things
me a
she
screenshot
mentioned,
of your email to her where it was just all caps, running late was the subject line. And then the body said, sorry.
yes. Yes. Yes, I did, and I'll do that, like, I've honestly I've been seeing the same therapist for, like, almost 3 years now, and the I've probably run late, like, maybe 3 times ever, and every time it's the same thing. I'm running late, and I send her an email in all caps in the subject line, "Running late," um, because, I'm just pure chaos. Um So anyway, yeah, my therapist had mentioned this and I was like, "Oh, you know what? That's kind of interesting." And I started googling it. I'm like, "Oh, we're doing an episode on this."
Did your therapist mention it because you have it?
No.
Oh, okay.
We were talking about I'll get into it, but I'll explain
Okay.
how it came up. We are talking about attachment theory today. Do you have any familiarity with attachment theory or it's been like a much bigger topic, I would say, in the last few years?
Um, no. Can I take a guess though?
Yeah.
Is it like the thing
No.
where
Sorry, I'm just kidding. Sorry.
is it the thing where like you're not supposed like, there's, like, that argument about, like, letting your kid cry it out versus not because they're, like, going to be too attached to you or, like, the mom gets too attached because and then, like so, like, since the pandemic when everybody was home all the time,
Mhm.
now all these people have, like, issues being apart from the people in their household because they were babies when everybody was around 100% of the time.
It's, like, very linked to that. So,
Oh, okay. I'm so smart.
you are so we are so good at this. So attachment theory is this psychological theory that kind of explains the emotional bonds and like relationships between people, and it's usually speaking about like a parent child relationship or a romantic partner relationship, usually in the sense that how you have adults as a relationship is rooted in how you had relationships as a child and as a baby.
You said how you have adults as a relationship. Do you mean how you have relationships as an adult?
Yeah, yeah, I
Okay.
do mean that.
Just making how I have
It's a really
adults.
good thing that Katie speaks Garrett because you're gonna need those skills today.
It's like that thing where, like, a toddler has, like, their weird phraseology for things and, like, the
Yes.
parent knows what they mean.
Yeah, or like your spouse does.
Yes.
And you both just speak this weird language to each other that other people don't get, yeah. That's kind of how it's going. I'm hoping that, like, I'll eventually hit my stride here and, like,
I'm hoping.
snap s something will be awake. Um, so the central theme of this theory is that the primary caregivers who are being available and responsive to a baby's needs, you then give that child a sense of security and they learn, okay, that, my caregiver is dependable, I'm safe, and that kind of gives them a basis for like going out into the world. So the caregiver relationship, if that's strong, it allows them to form normal, like, social and emotional attachments as adults,
Okay.
is kind of the crux of this. Um, and I think too, it's one of those things like you start to get to know somebody and they talk about their childhood and it kind of gives you some insight to their how they think and how they behave. It's kind of that on like a bigger scale. Um
Okay. So kind of like the trope of, like, if you're the oldest daughter, you're gonna be better at, like, taking charge.
Right, because
Um,
maybe, more was expected of you as a child.
right.
So this is like a and it affects really like all of your interpersonal relationships, but especially like your romantic relationships as you get older. Um, and they also feel that another like tenet of this is um people who are born is that people are born with this need to forge bonds with their caregivers as children. And however those form, that's going to kind of dictate how a lot of your attachments go throughout your life. Um, as
That's why
well,
Homelander is a sociopath
yeah. I
in The
would
Boys.
I would argue he's a psychopath. I
I
think
I'll be honest, I'm not totally clear on the distinction between the 2. But
isn't psychopath when you like act on it like it's beyond just not feeling. It's like I don't I don't
I
know.
really have no idea.
Well,
Um,
tune into
I
next
thought it
episode.
was like um, I thought, like, psychopathy was, like, the overall term, but then you can have, like, sociopath, antisocial personality disorder, like,
Oh, see, I thought
all
it was
those
the opposite. I thought sociopathy was like the big umbrella and all those little
Tell us
things
in
were
the
underneath.
comments.
Somebody educate us.
You do the work, listener.
That's how this podcast works. We pose a question and want somebody else to answer it.
Garrett can't handle answering that
I
question right now, guys.
can't.
You gotta help.
I'm gonna try my best. I really am. I promise that I'm giving this my best possible effort for the amount of sleep I have.
But yeah, for those who don't know, Homelander was basically raised in a, like, plexiglass cube.
Yeah.
as a superhero child or a child with
Test
superpowers.
subject. Yeah.
Um, and, like, has real weird attachment issues with,
There's a
older women in his
lot of
life.
attachment issues. There's also another tenet of this where they feel that the theory is that um, behaviors that toddlers are showing familiar adults in their life will have some continuity with the behaviors that they show later in life as an adult, which I thought was interesting too. Um,
So,
which
like, if
I'm
they
sure
look you
is
in the eye while they're pooping, they're gonna do that as an adult?
for sure. Yeah.
Okay.
If they yeet a plate off of their high chair, they're for sure going to do that as an adult. That's why Trump is throwing plates of ketchup.
Ah,
Um,
that's a delicacy in some parts of Mar-a-Lago.
Ooh. So before attachment theory was developed, um, generally the field of psychology had this thought that the attachment between a baby and caregiver was a learned thing that was based on the caregiver providing food. Like they thought that it was just like very basic, almost like owner to animal type of
Yeah.
type of relationship. So this psychiatrist, John Bowlby in the 70s, um, he started doing these studies and observed that feedings did not diminish the separation anxiety that existed when a baby was taken away from a parent. Um,
Hmm.
he found that attachment was characterized by like very clear behavioral and motivational patterns. So, if a child is frightened, they're going to seek their primary caregiver for comfort and
Mhm.
security. He believed that the earliest bonds formed by children with their caregivers has a tremendous impact that continues throughout their life, and suggested that attachment also serves to keep the baby close to the parent, which is going to improve the child's chance of survival. So he felt that this was really like an evolutionary thing, as opposed to, this primary concept where, oh, this is just like a learned behavior. They know that that's where they're getting food. He realized that, oh, no, this is like an evolutionary thing where there's this innate drive for children to form a bond with the caregiver, which is going to comfort them and protect them, and they're going to be more likely to survive through to adulthood.
So
And
this
it
is like the storyline of Monsters, Inc.
for sure, yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
without a doubt. There's no other explanation. The
Because
number of
Boo gets
times
really attached to Sully.
that Monsters Inc. has come up in this podcast. I was listening to an old episode where we were put that thing back where it came from, or so help me. That's my brain today.
That was just gonna say, like, what a time
Is
for
just
you
Mike
to pull that out of
Wazowski
your
just like
folds.
dancing and yeah. Oh, lordy.
Your brain is actually when they're, like, beating the shit out of Randall and he's, like, turning all the different colors. That's your
Yes.
brain right now.
And just like different shapes.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's exactly what's happening. Um so a psychologist, Mary Ainsworth in the 70s, after, this theory came out, she kind of expanded on that because he had like a long career. So he, as time went on, just added on to these building blocks. So she expanded upon this in the 70s. She did this study called the Strange Situation Study, which was like very groundbreaking. They observed children between the ages of 12 and 18 months, and they would briefly leave them alone and then reunite them with their mothers. So, based on the responses observed, they developed these different attachment styles, which we'll get into the details of these attachment styles, but it was secure attachment, ambivalent insecure attachment, avoidant insecure attachment, and then in the 80s, a fourth attachment style called disorganized insecure attachment was added on by this other set of psychologists, Main and Solomon. So I'll get to that.
Okay.
Um, and there's also been a number of studies since that have supported these attachment styles and has confirmed that attachment styles have an impact on behaviors later in life. So this has been well proven through multiple studies have reached the same conclusion.
Okay.
Um, and there was another one that they talked about, which I just thought was kind of like it's kind of sad to think about, but it was also very interesting. Um, Harry Harlow did a study on maternal deprivation, they were calling it, and also on social isolation during the 50s and 60s. So they were trying to demonstrate how bonds emerge and the impact that has on like behavior and functioning. And what they did was they took newborn monkeys and they separated them from their birth mothers and they put them in a cage with two different wire monkey mothers. So one of them was just wire and it was holding a bottle, and the other one was wire, but it had like soft, like terry cloth wrapped around it. And
Okay.
they found that,
This is
because
nightmare fuel, by the way.
truly, also these
Like,
poor little baby monkeys.
I mean, honestly, like,
Yeah,
that's all like, this is out of, like, Saw. Like, what the fuck?
that's what I was like, it's sad.
Yeah, this is House of a Thousand Corpses territory.
Um, they found, so, this conventional psychological stance would be that they would just be going to the one that had the bottle. But they found that the monkeys would, yeah, they would go to the one for food, but they were spending most of their days with the one that was like soft and comforting. That's where they would go where they were frightened, for
Mm.
comfort and security, which I'm also like, what were you doing to scare these poor little newborn monkeys in this
I mean
nightmare chamber? And I do think that this has come up a lot recently, with like the um wave of like gentle parenting.
Mhm.
um I will say personally, I feel like it's a fairly frequent conversation, not to make generalizations, but with baby boomers, um when I say things like, "Oh, my baby will only contact nap," and they're like, "Oh, they're gonna get used to that." And I'm like, I mean, yeah, but the thought is when you make a baby feel very secure and safe and that you're very responsive to them, that they in turn then become ultimately more independent because they feel secure going out into the world. They don't feel like, and
They're
then you kind of get
alone.
eye rolls from baby boomers. So,
I'm just reminded of that episode of Friends where Joey and Ross fell asleep on each other on the
mhm,
couch, and they, like, woke up and they were like, "We can't talk about it." Like, it was very homophobic, kind of.
mhm,
But then they were like, "It was a great nap." They were like, "That was so nice."
yeah,
Like,
it's
sleeping
there's
like, snuggling and sleeping is the best.
right. And honestly, it helps, like, if I wanna take a nap, like, you're not supposed to nap with the baby on you. But at the same time, like, I'll prop stuff up. I don't do it when I'm home alone and, all this other anyway, there's precautions taken, but, it really does, like, you definitely wind up with, like, that oxytocin release, and, like, you're so much more, it, like, puts me to sleep
Well, and they
when
do
she
it
sleeps
with,
on my chest.
it's like a huge thing for babies who are in the NICU, like that
Mhm.
skin to skin thing,
Yeah.
because it can
Makes
help
a big
regulate their
difference.
body temperature and
Blood
even out.
sugar and
Yeah, like
yeah.
it like the studies that they've done on that is just so interesting that it regulates your blood pressure, it regulates your body
And for
temperature.
the parent too, like,
Yes.
also
Yeah.
regulates those things. So, it is like my philosophy is, yes, she contact naps, and it can be very frustrating because there are times where I am nap trapped. But the flip side is like she's not gonna wanna do that forever.
I like the
So,
phrase nap trapped.
yeah, isn't that cute?
Yeah, I wanna be
Um,
nap trapped.
yeah,
I'll probably take a
it's
nap after we record this, to be honest.
I
It's been a
I'll just
time.
be glad if I make it to the end alive. Um
At least your power didn't go out. Your power never comes back on.
There was one day I was texting our group chat and then was like, our power went out for no reason." It
Yeah, it
came
was like
back
a
on a couple
sunny
minutes
day.
later, but I was just like, so I do think that, this is probably a much more, I feel like attachment theory is used a lot in parenting now, and
Mhm.
it's something that people are using because I do think there is so much more of an awareness
Was
with
it not used in parenting before?
not really.
So what was
I
the
mean, like, I
application
think
for it for all those studies?
that it started the shift of, like,
Oh, okay.
maybe we should be nice to kids,
Nah,
as
they're
opposed to, like,
jerks.
seen and not heard and spare the rod, spoil the child bullshit, but,
Well, you're
because you
the one
figure,
who's tired, so
um, must be nice to have a pension, boomers. Um, I think that, they started developing these between, like, the '70s and, like, '80s and '90s, so I feel like that was kind of the tail end of
Mhm.
that hard style parenting.
Yeah.
So I think, like, it's just been, like, incorporated, it's kind of, like, folded in, because all I can think about is that
Fold
Schitt's
in the
Creek.
cheese.
Just fold in the attachment theory to the parenting. Um, so yeah, I think it's definitely more of, like, a common philosophy behind parenting now. Um, there was a longitudinal study that was done with 60 infants where they would observe them every 4 weeks during their first year of life and then again at 18 months.
Okay.
And in that they identified, do you hear that?
No.
My mom is, like, trying really hard to get the baby to laugh right now, and, like, I can hear how absurd it is up here with headphones on and the door half closed.
Has she tried
Um,
turning into Kermit the Frog?
I t so I told her, I said, "The only person who's been able to get her to laugh, like, anywhere close to how you do is Katie." I said, and she fully was Kermit freaking out about something, like, hands going, head going. I was like, "It's so much work."
I was
Um,
genuinely sore the next day, like, my muscles were sore.
yeah. That's that video you sent me where he was like, "Carrying a baby around all day is exhausting." Yeah, it really is. I'm just, like, carrying a little wrestling muscly arms and legs going all the time, screeching, squirmy thing. So these researchers identified
Sorry.
4 different stages of attachment. Um, so there's the pre-attachment stage, which is birth to 3, and these are like approximations, some babies are gonna be ahead, behind, whatever. If a baby is premature, that's also going to, like, impact their development and their milestones. So I'm just gonna say, like, generally, give or take, birth to 3 months. Infants don't really show an attachment to, like, a specific caregiver. They cry, they fuss. That is designed to attract the attention of a caregiver. Then it soothes the baby, which encourages the caregiver to remain close. Like, it's a very, primal kind of exchange,
Mhm.
which, newborn phase, you're don't really feel like a human being. You kind of feel a little bit like a Neanderthal, just, like, dragging yourself around and
Yeah, it's all primal, you're just like prime
yeah,
rib, baby.
just prime rib only. Um, then they transition to indiscriminate attachment, which is roughly 6 weeks to 7 months, um, where they begin to show some preference for, like, primary and secondary caregivers. They start to develop a trust that the caregiver will respond to their needs when they cry and they fuss. But they still accept some care from others, but they start to distinguish between, like, people they know, people they don't know, and they're going to respond the most positively to their primary caregivers that they know. Um, then they move into the discriminate attachment, which is roughly 7 months to about a year old. They have strong attachment and preference for one specific individual. They protest when they're separated from the primary attachment figure, separation anxiety, and then they begin to have anxiety around strangers, stranger anxiety. I know my baby is definitely entering this phase. She usually just wants me. She will sometimes accept dad, sometimes will accept other people, but primarily wants to be hanging out with me. Um, and I know, like, when I was Googling separation anxiety because she had a few full fucking meltdowns when somebody else took her. Um, I started doing a little bit of reading about it, which obviously it's developmentally completely normal.
Mhm.
And it can last anywhere from 18 months to 3 years old. So I'm sorry, from 6 months to 3 years old, not 18 months,
At
six
what
months to
point
3 years
is your
old.
baby just a racist for not wanting for, like, just discriminating too much?
Um,
Is that,
that's a
like,
really
when once
great
pre-K
question.
happens?
We don't send them to pre-K until they're actually a neo-Nazi. We wait until the baby is full-blown all right
All
before.
discrimination attachments.
Yes. The most discriminating of attachments.
Mm. It's like in, did you ever watch that movie Rat Race? It came out in, like, 2000.
Yeah, was Mr. Bean in it?
Yes.
Yeah, yeah, I did see that.
So, there was, like, a scene where, they're, like, on it's like a family, and they're in their minivan, and it's like a mom, Kathy Najimy is the mom.
Mhm.
I can't think of the guy who played the dad, and then they have a son and a daughter, and they're, like, driving to New Mexico, and the daughter's like, "Oh my god, a Barbie museum," because she sees, like, a billboard for it, and she's like, "Come on, dad, please," and the mom is like, "Look, like, we've been in the car for so long, like, just pull over, we'll go," and it was, like, Nazi Barbie, and
Oh,
so it
no.
was, like, whatever like, a Barbie, and so it was all about, like, glorifying Hitler and Goebbels and all these other things, and so they're all sitting there like, "Oh my god, and they're, like, in this tour with other people who have, like, heinous tattoos on them and whatnot, and they're like, "Oh, we have to go. It's, a christening for the," and they, like, are trying to rattle off these, like,
Some
super
kind of
waspy
excuse.
names.
That's
And then we
good.
have a book burning, and, like, they're, like, saying all these different
A
things
book
to try
burning.
to get out of there before.
I forgot about that. I mean, literally, when you said, "Do you remember this movie?" and I said, "Was Mr. Bean in it?" That's the extent of what I remember from that movie.
Ah, yeah, he had narcolepsy and kept falling asleep.
What's that like? What is that like?
Yeah, you went from having insomnia to, having narcolepsy
Yeah,
about a year later, so
about that.
the circle of life.
Um, they then kids then move into multiple attachments. This is saying roughly around, 9 plus months of age, where they can form strong emotional bonds with, people beyond their primary attachment figure. So other parent, other siblings, grandparents, all of that.
Mhm.
Um, so this is kind of the meat of it. We have the attachment styles. So what I did is I got some information on them, but then I found, like, an example in, like, movies or TV of
Okay.
somebody that displays that attachment style because I find that helpful using examples, but I
Yeah,
think you're
thank you.
really going to enjoy the first example.
Oh boy, is it me?
Actually, I wanna give you the description and see if you can tell me who you think the example is because
Oh,
I
it's
feel
Gene
like you could.
Hackman.
Oh god, I wish. I fucking wish. What if it was Hugh Jackman? It's not.
Potato,
I
tomato.
will I will give you a hint. It's neither of those 2/1 person.
Okay.
So the first attachment style is anxious/ambivalent attachment.
Okay.
So these are kids who become very distressed when a parent leaves, which is really the result of poor parental availability. So that it creates a situation where the child feels like they cannot depend on their primary caregiver to be there when they need them.
Okay.
Um, it's not considered like the most common attachment, but you think about like a child who develops an anxious attachment style will probably be an anxious kid who then will probably could ultimately wind up with like an anxiety disorder. Um,
Okay. So is it like if they can't put eyes on their parent, they get they start, like, stimming or, like, having these kind of anxious
they're
behaviors?
gonna they're gonna act out in a very like high strung, kind of like clingy, um, they can't like they need a lot of reassurance. They can't, they have a hard time trusting, a hard
Is the
time, like
character the, elephant from Tarzan, the cartoon, who's afraid of the water?
no, that's not the character.
Okay.
Um, but yeah, you've got somebody who is just like they need a lot of reassurance. They can like get close to people and really like crave getting close, but sometimes it's like too much too soon. So like they want to be close, but they're also constantly worried that their relationship status um and the partner maybe doesn't feel as strongly as them. Like it's a very insecure um, kind of core to their attachments. And they're
Mhm.
all very sensitive to partners' moods, tend to be kind of temperamental. And there's just a lot of like doubts, worries, emotional swings. It usually makes like for a kind of like unstable attachment uh,
Okay.
because you've got somebody who's like very reactive, anxious, um, kind of clingy in their attachment style. Um, Would you like to know who the example is? Or do you
Yes.
have a guess?
I I I don't have a guess without, like, a description of the show or movie that you're citing to.
How about this? Which Friends character has an
Oh, it's
anxious
Ross.
attachment? Yes. So full disclosure,
Speaking
listeners,
of people who like contact napping.
I have not watched Friends. I refuse to watch Friends. So when I have a Friends reference that I can give, or like I'll use a GIF and I'll be like, did I Friends right? So this is my friend's reference for Katie. So I have not seen it, but I found this great article that was talking about examples of all of these different like TV movie characters and their attachment style. Um, so this was Ross was the example that they gave for an anxious attachment.
Yeah.
So the write up that they had was Ross is a classic anxious attacher. He's insecure about his relationship with Rachel and he's completely over the top. For example, sending the barbershop quartet to her office and then showing up with the picnic because she was working late. It says,
Yeah.
remember how jealous Ross was of Rachel's colleague Mark and how immediately after she said she needed a break, he sought validation from the Xerox girl?
Yeah.
All signs of a classic anxious attachment.
Mhm. Yeah, absolutely. Also interesting that he also voiced the, very anxious giraffe in
Melman.
Madagascar. Yeah.
Yes, he was Melman. Um, so that is an anxious attachment style. That's the first one, or ambivalent attachment. Um, but I thought it was helpful to have, not that it makes sense to me, but like I can also think of like friends that I had anxious attachments, and it was very clear, like in the way that they were friends to other people,
Mhm.
as well as people they were dating. Like I think everybody had either a friend or dated somebody that was so incredibly insecure and like needing that reassurance all the time. Um,
Yeah, this actually plays in really well to what I'm gonna cover in episode 78, so
oh,
good job.
good. Hey, you know
We're,
what?
like, super good at plotting out our episodes.
There's gonna be more connections that are gonna make you scream.
Not in a good way.
We're like, are you fucking kidding me? Um, the
Our
next
next,
attach
like, Apple Podcast review is gonna be like, "This podcast makes me scream in bad ways."
5 stars.
Yeah.
um, the next attachment style is avoidant attachment. So,
I feel like I've heard of that one before, but I don't know if it's just because it's easy to, like, rattle off or if it's, like, is it more common?
um, it's pretty common. Like, I mean, they're not giving stats on any of these because I feel like it's kind of like a hard thing to like quantify.
Yeah.
And I'll also get into like your attachment style can change over time. Um, so avoidant attachment, like one way you can summarize it is like a fuck boy. So you've got somebody who um kind of avoids attachment. Um, so children who have this type of attachment tend to avoid parents or caregivers, and they don't show any preference between a caregiver and a complete stranger. It can be the result of abusive or neglectful caregivers or children who are punished for relying on a caregiver. Um, will
Oof.
then avoid seeking help from them in the future. So they just, like
That's sad.
it is so and that's what, like, you think about some of the stuff and you're like, "Oh," you can definitely see how, like, if people don't heal or work on these wounds that I mean, the trickle down is
Oh,
what I
for
mean,
sure.
affecting every relationship in your life forever until you work
Mhm.
on it. Um, so these are, types of people who need a lot more space. They value a lot of their personal freedoms over anything else. You usually will see it described as like a fear of intimacy. Um, they say from a like a kind of a neurological point of view, they they look at it like they have these avoidants have the same need for closeness and intimacy as anybody else, but they suppress those needs. And in doing that, they're focusing on the negative aspects of their partners. Um, and ultimately, they wind up being in less happy relationships
So
or
don't feel
with
bad if
less
you're
happy
getting,
partners.
like, ghosted by a fuckboy because they're not satisfied either.
It's true. Um, It's really just like a defense mechanism to avoid getting close, to avoid pain and rejection because of what they experience as a child from their primary caregiver.
Mhm.
Um, so again, this is not a show that I've seen more than a few episodes of, but they mention Lorelai from Gilmore Girls. Did you watch Gilmore
I
Girls?
never watched Gilmore Girls, and I feel like it was I mean, so I'm born in '87. I feel like it was just, like, a little before me, like, coming of age and, like, it
Yeah.
being kind of age appropriate, and so then by the time it would have been age appropriate, my college roommate, loved it, like,
Mhm.
hands down, like, absolutely loved that show, and, but I just could never really get into it, and I've, like, considered kind of starting it and just having it be, like, a new show that I watch, but I don't know, I feel like I get enough information from the memes.
Katie in a nutshell. I thought about doing it, but the memes gave me all I needed.
I was actually
That was
picturing
excellent.
Justin Long's character from, the movie He's Just Not That Into You.
For a second,
When
I
you
was like, Justin Long was in Gilmore Girls?
No.
Just blew my mind.
No, and He's Just Not That Into You, I think that's the movie. The the female protagonist in, like, that relationship, because the movie follows, like, several relationships, um, he is, like, kind of using her, like, you know, is like, she's a cool chick to hang out with, whatever, and she's kind of, like, reading more into it than he is, and there comes a point where like, he kinda, like, snaps at her because she, like, went in for a kiss, and he was like, "Why do you have to ruin everything? Like, we were just friends, blah, 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 blah," and, like, snaps at her, and she was like, "You know what? Like, maybe I don't, like, maybe I read more into things and I fall in love when I shouldn't, but at least, like, I'm not gonna end up alone like you are," or something like that, and, like but it's that kinda thing where he's like, she's setting up like, he's hosting parties in his apartment and, like, cleaning up after him and, like, helping guests get more drinks, and, like, he's just like, "Okay, I think it's time for you to go home," and she's like, "What do you mean?" And it's very, like, fuckboy,
Yeah.
um, territory, like well, I mean, we'll talk about it in that episode I do in a couple weeks, but, Yeah, that's what I was thinking of when you said that one. But yeah, absolutely. I mean, I've definitely dated guys like this.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, yeah. The example that they gave was Lorelai from Gilmore Girls. They said that she's a classic avoidant attacher, so I guess to our listeners, if, you're a Gilmore Girls fan, this will work. I was hoping Katie had seen it so she could verify, "Yes, that is
No.
accurate." Neither of us have watched it.
Nope.
So she keeps Jason a secret from her parents, ostensibly because she doesn't want them involved, but really because she wants to keep him at arm's length, breaks up with Max by literally running away from their wedding, pushes Luke away constantly, eventually convincing herself he's not right because he won't marry her on the spot with 5 seconds notice. Um, but yeah, no, I think the good thing about learning these attachment styles is it gives you insight to people in that you can meet somebody and even if you don't know their whole sordid history or whatever happened in their past or whatever trauma they experienced, this kind of gives you a little bit of insight like, oh, okay, like I can see this attachment style playing out. Um, because, I mean, if somebody's like an anxious or ambivalent attachment, they need a lot of reassurance. And they probably need you to be like very calm and clear in explaining how you feel about something and not being really reactive.
Mhm.
If you've got somebody that's avoidant attachment, they're saying, open and honest communication with partners about their need for space is very important in order to make relationships work, but probably that's only if you can actually get them in a relationship
R
because they do this
right.
bullshit.
Yeah, I
Um,
feel like that would be a conversation that happens maybe if you're given a second date, like if they deign to return your calls or whatever. But,
so many of them out
yeah,
there.
Lorelai sounds frustrating as fuck. I'm not sure I would like Gilmore Girls. That sounds really fucking irritating. I feel like I'd get really annoyed
Yes.
with her.
Especially considering she's the parent in that situation.
Right, and I think the whole thing is, like, she was a teen mom
Yeah.
because she's, like in the show, she's, like, my age. She's, like, 36. Not even, I don't think,
That's
actually. She might be 30
woof.
with a teenager. Yeah,
Um,
which is, I think, the source of, like, her tension with her parents.
that makes sense. Yeah. And I do feel like she was very young. The next not personality, attachment style is disorganized and fearful attachment. So, children who display a confusing mix of behavior, seeming disorganized, dazed, or confused, maybe avoidant or resist the parent. The lack of a clear attachment pattern is likely linked to inconsistent caregiver behavior,
Mm,
where the parents serve as both a source of comfort and fear, which then leads to disorganized behavior. Um,
yeah, that makes sense. I feel like especially if, like, you're a child in, like, a foster care situation or where, like, CPS is involved in your home in one way or another, or if your
mhm,
parent is struggling with substance abuse disorders, um, then that would be probably that.
right, that makes sense. Um,
When you say they exhibit disorganized what'd you say? Disorganized something? Behaviors?
disorganized behaviors.
Is
Yep.
that just like ADHD? Like, I'm disorganized? Like
No, this is like craving closeness and intimacy and being clingy, but then as soon as someone gets close, like running away.
oh, okay.
So like really wanting a relationship, but then as soon as it gets serious, you freak out.
Okay.
Um, and they're kind of a combination of the um anxious and avoidant
Mhm.
attachment styles.
Yeah.
Um, there's a lot of like self-destruction, sabotaging a relationship because you're uncomfortable, um, that kind of like push-pull dynamic. And it's usually due to some kind of underlying childhood trauma, but it's something that can be worked on for sure.
Mhm.
Um, so the example that they give is another one I have not watched. Sex and the City, did you watch that?
Not really. I mean, I saw the first movie.
Okay, so we're really killing it with these examples. Um, Carrie Bradshaw is the example that they give.
Oh, okay. I
So
mean, I
def
understand that reference.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah.
I've literally watched, like, 3 episodes of her. Um,
Again,
she
I see, like, the memes and the my
and
understanding is,
that's
like, the
all I
movie
need to
happened
know.
because it took her so long to, like, pick a guy that she actually wanted to get married to or whatever the fuck,
This is how
and so
Grey's Anatomy lost me. I got through, like, I don't know, 3 or 4 seasons of Will They, Won't They, and I was like, "I
Yeah, so, like,
enough."
this is, like, Meredith Grey and also Derek Shepherd also, I feel like.
Um, they said that Carrie desperately craved male attention, having a never-ending stream of boyfriends, but as soon as the relationship got comfortable, she pushes them away. Um, so the
Kinda
example they
feels
give
like they
is
were making her sound slutty. Like
it kinda does. It's weird, they say big old hoe. I don't know what that has to um, so it says, "Look at Aiden, he proposed, and when she had the reassurance that he loved her, she refused to wear the ring and cheated on him. Even Mr. Big, she chased after him for years, constantly pining for him, turning herself inside out to please him. Then as soon as they're engaged and she's comfortable, she's throwing a wedding he's explicitly saying he's not interested in. She absconds to Mexico with her friend saying, 'It's all my fault.'" Um, which,
well,
yeah,
I mean,
that
it was
sounds
you.
disorganized.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Also, yes, it was your fault.
Right, he said, "This is getting out of hand," and you were like, "Cool, I'm just gonna wear this, $10,000 couture wedding dress, and we'll get married at New York Public Library, and, you know, 300 of our closest friends, and then another 600 of our least closest friends will be invited, and it'll be perfect. Why don't you wanna marry me?" Because he, like, texted her the day of and, like, in the limo and was like, "I can't do this," and, like, whatever. Spoiler, I guess. I don't know. The movie came out like 15 years ago.
And I have absolutely no interest in watching it. So I don't care about spoilers,
I
but
can't
if you're
imagine like I just don't I refuse to take responsibility for spoiling something like that where
no.
it's not like The Sixth Sense or something. Like
It's been out too long at this
well, and
point
right,
to
like even The
yeah.
Sixth Sense, I feel like it came out in like 1998. Like
Oh, yeah, no. Sixth Sense, like, if you haven't seen that at this point, I don't feel bad about spoiling it for
yeah.
sure. He was a ghost the whole time. So, um
Ah! This is now a spoilers podcast.
um the last attachment style is secure attachment. So, children who can depend on caregivers, um, who show distress when they're separated, joy when they're reunited. Like even if they're upset, they know that their caregiver is going to return. Um, they will seek, reassurance and security from their caregivers. Um, and it's the most common attachment style.
And what's it called again?
Um, Secure attachment.
Oh, okay. So this is like the one that you want.
This is yes,
Like,
this is
everybody has
ideal.
an attachment style, it's
Yes.
just whether like, which one you have.
Yes, and this is the most
Cool.
common, and I do feel too like, obviously, I'm gonna get more into secure attachment, but I also feel like all of the media that we were seeing when we were younger, especially, like, rom-coms and, like, shows, there was always, like, um, somebody cheats on this one, and then she's throwing his stuff out the window onto the lawn, and big explosive fights, and, like, being
Yeah,
really manipulative with each other,
and
like
winning you have to win the person back or they have to win
right.
you back or whatever it is,
Playing
yeah.
hard to get and, like, all of the, like it gamified a lot of, like, relationship-based things.
Yeah,
Um, Obviously, those are all, like, disorganized, avoidant, and anxious attachment styles that really aren't the most common. Like, it was one of those things, like, then you start dating and you're like, "Oh, wait, this is not how it goes." For, like, the vast majority of people, You're just in a regular relationship. You're not having these giant explosive fights and throwing your stuff on the lawn.
Oh, you're not?
I don't. I never
Oh,
did. Um, and
me
that's
neither.
not to
I'm
say
just kidding.
like it you were saying that and I was like, "When
Breaking news.
were you doing this, Katie?" Side note, what is the number for your therapist? Um,
I need to make a call. It's
I
urgent.
unrelated to this conversation, just have to make a very brief phone call. Um,
No, no,
and
don't pause the recording.
let's keep it live. Hold on, I'm gonna do an Instagram live really quick, unrelated to this again. Um, so people, like I said, this is the most common attachment style, and the people who have this attachment style develop stronger self-esteem. They're more self-reliant, more independent, tend to be better students. They have successful social relationships, and experience less depression and anxiety. Um, well, I gave Katie the heads up while I was doing this research that this might be 2 episodes, and because we're, actually, I think we're doing a pretty good job of staying on topic, but there's just a lot of meat to cover. So, we will wrap up this conversation next week.
Yeah.
I was gonna make
Um,
a beat your meat joke, but that's too much. Um, so sorry for that.
thanks.
Oh,
Um,
Katie has no leg to stand on.
yeah, but they won't know that till next week.
No leg
So
to stand on. Tune in
so
next
tune in
week to
next
hear
week.
why Katie cannot make a comment about me saying beat your meat.
Um,
Anyway,
in the meantime, we are on Patreon. Support us that way by going to patreon.com/thebarsankle-high. All members get ad-free episodes, extended cut episodes, and video episodes in addition to being added to our close friends list on Instagram. You can also please write us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts. Actually, like writing out the review is the best way to support us. It like helps push the algorithm gods to put our podcast in front of new people. Make sure you're following us
and it
on
really does work.
it does. And make sure you follow us on Instagram at the bars ankle high. And we are also on threads at that same handle. And that's all I got.
Cool.
So
Tune
until
in next
next
week.
week, yeah, to find out what legs I have or don't.
What legs I have or don't. Yeah, we'll finish up our conversation about attachment theory, and the different attachment styles, next week. So
Mm-hmm.
remember to stay away from, wire monkeys.
Yeah. 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 Because the bar is ankle high.
Bye.
Bye.